Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name's Vin PF, and on today's episode we're going to be covering another Summerton bottle. Now, if you don't know, I'll just cover Summerton quickly, and they're a UK-based whiskey club that delivers one bottle for 50 quid every 2 months. That isn't £25 a month, that's 50 quid, 1 month on, 1 month off. I've been covering these guys for years. I've been a member of their club for, I don't know now, 3 years, something like that. And I've enjoyed their bottles in kind of varying degrees. They've always been interesting, that's what I've said. There's probably been like one bottle that I've not been terribly keen on. More often than not, though, they've been utterly astounding. We'll get into it if that is this soon. Now, what we have today is the Whisky Baron. There you go. And this is a 15-year-old single grain Scotch whisky. It doesn't actually say it on here, I don't think, but it's actually a Girvan. And this has been finished in fresh port casks. Lovely jubbly. Now, grain is not something I get to cover very often. It's not something that I tend to buy, which is really stupid, because I love it. I love single grain whiskey, especially when it's been aged for a good amount of time. Typically, I've been lucky enough to try some like 58-year-old grain and stuff like that. Typically around sort of 25 years is like, mwah. But people are catching on. It used to be you'd get a really good bargain when it comes to grain, get some really like heavily aged sort of 30-year-old grain for dirt cheap, and that's still the case today. You can get hold of like a 30-year-old grain for an absolute snippet in comparison to what a single malt would be. But the price is going up as people start catching on with these things, so it's becoming increasingly difficult to get really like good quality grains. Coming back to Summerton Club, now this is the second grain they've done. The first one they did was just over a year ago, and they did a split bottling. They got the exceptional blend, and they had the exceptional grain, and some people got one, some people got the other. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it wasn't my preference, unfortunately I got the exceptional blend, not the grain, but I was fortunate enough that one of my friends, who is also a member, got the grain, so I was able to do a side-by-side video before I sent that back to him. But the downside of me doing that side-to-side was that I would have much preferred to get the grain, but it is what it is. So going full circle is something that I don't typically buy, but more for me because I tend to love single grain, especially when it's done right. So yeah, essentially this is a £50 bottle of whiskey. Now, if you weren't a member of the club, then you've missed out on getting this, but it is technically still available. If you do join the club, you can buy it on the club shop, but it's now 70 quid. So already, you can see the deal that we got there, which is insane. It's, absolutely insane. But, if you're in the UK and you're into whiskey and you like a bit of a surprise, then as always, I wholeheartedly recommend you check out the Summerton Club. There'll be a link in the description below, and that isn't an affiliate link. I'm not, I'm a paid member of this place, so take it from me, paid customer, really enjoy it. Whisky Baron as well is an independent bottler who primarily focuses on Scotch, and they're well worth checking out as well. They've managed to get their hands on some really astounding stuff over the years, and they don't release like bottle all the time. It's just like they only put stuff out when it's ready and it's really good. So go and check them out because they've got some astounding bottles. If you're into kind of really high aged Scotch, then yeah, definitely worth checking out. Now, there's a little bit of a story that came about with this because it's an interesting whiskey that it's not the first Whisky Baron that Summerton have done, but they apparently started talking about this like 2 years ago, something like that, and they tried it when it was a 13-year-old ex-bourbon cask single grain. Now, this is over like 6 barrels, something like that, and it wasn't quite ready yet. They didn't think so. It was probably good, but if you start tasting whiskey like that, if you're going to bottle it under your own name, you kind of get a feeling whether it's right for your brand or not. And I guess the feeling generally there was that just to give it a bit more time. However, they decided a little bit after that, I think roughly about 14 years in the cask, that they were going to re-rack it and stick it in these fresh port hogsheads. I don't know quite how many of those were, but in any case, fresh port casks. So that's kind of given it an extra dimension, and that's going to be roughly, in the literature it says about a year and a half, but I'm given to understand it's just slightly less, about that kind of year and a half mark. Interesting. So now we have what a 15-year-old potentially 15.5, something like that, you know, but a 15-year-old single grain Girvan, which I think is exceptional. You know, if you look on Master of Malt right now, you can see, you can't really find a 15-year-old, but you can see some of comparable age that are not that cheap. And this is a 70 CL as well, you know, some of them are like half litres and whatnot. Presented at 51.4%, not quite cask strength, but I think that's ideal for a grain. You know, it doesn't always sing at that cask strength. Sometimes it needs to have a bit of levelling out, so I'm absolutely fine with that. And obviously the cool things, non-chill filtered, natural coloured, blah blah blah. Moving on to the whiskey itself thing, I've talked a lot about it there, but that's only because on the bottle there isn't really that much information, certainly none of that. You know, that's all information that we were given as club members, so I'm going to impart that to you because I don't think you're going to find that online anywhere. Although, I have to say, there is a great interview with both founders of the Whisky Baron and the Summerton Club, Dan and Jake, and or the other way around to match up. There's a video on the Whisky Baron's YouTube that you can go check out if you really want to see like a full 20-minute video of how this came about, and I'll pop a link in the description below for that as well. Moving on to the actual tasting then, a lot of wittering, apologies about that. Now, because it's natural colouring, I don't mind talking about that, but you can check here that, I mean, if this was ex-bourbon, then it would probably be something like quite light, quite straw-like, something like that. Chucking it in with port, especially fresh port as well, you know, that's going to impart some extra stuff. Now this, to me, is kind of like rose goldy, which I really like. Really nice kind of looking whiskey. Let's get onto the nose then and see what we've got in the glass. Now for me, and I do say this an awful lot, then it's like it really benefits from sitting out on the side. You know, I mean, I've whittled on about this for a good 7 minutes or so. And I had this poured before, but it really benefits from that kind of, you know, exposure, let's say. But for me, it starts out with kind of a really sweet kind of red berries nose. It's almost like a sponge cake kind of vibe, with like a little bit of like white chocolate on the back end. It's really nice. Like, I mean, that all together sounds quite sickly and sweet, and it isn't. It is sweet, but I wouldn't call it sickly. Really lovely. Let's try on the palate. Now, very interesting because it starts out just as sweet as the nose, but for me it kind of morphs into a kind of sourness as it's kind of developing, and it reminds me, this is such a weird tasting note, but it reminds me of those Haribo sweets, the I can never say that word, Tanfastics. Pop an image up. Obviously there's loads of different flavours in there, but there's kind of like a cherry one and like a, you know, like the key shaped ones or whatever they are. It's like that. Initially sweet and sours out without the kind of like, you know, you get what I'm talking about. It kind of finishes off to me as well, kind of a spiciness, kind of cracked pepper almost. Let's have another sip. Now, the finish kind of just keeps going on and on and on. The sweetness has kind of died down a little bit for me. It's kind of a long, soury pepperiness on a finish, which, again, I say this all the time whenever I say sour as a tasting note. It's bloody lovely. You know, that's not a negative word, sour. It can be, you know, if you use it in the wrong context, but then I guess so can sweet. But yeah, it's got this beautiful kind of souriness on the back end that is really quite moreish and really makes me want to just keep going back in, which I'm going to after this. Now, big summary on this, it's 50 quid I got it for, and that is an absolute steal. 70 quid, I would definitely be happy with it as well. Definitely, I think everybody should go and check out the Summerton Club as well. I know sometimes they cap it out and it's difficult to get in, but they're constantly releasing stuff like this, and I'm extremely happy with this, and I'm extremely happy to have more grain on the shelf again. Downside is that I think this might actually be my only bottle of single grain right now, and it's going to go. I'm going to find it. I'm going to have to put this at the back of my cabinet, but I'm going to be reaching for it. It doesn't matter what guard whiskies I put in front of this. They're going to be pushed out of the way, and this is going to be gone. Probably before even the next bottle turns up in a couple of months. Next month now, I guess, because I'm always a little bit delayed with these things. I like to give them a bit of time. But yeah, whittled on an awful lot. But for me, absolute winner. Love single grain. Love Summerton Club. Love Whisky Baron. All these things together. I have to say, now that I'm saying that together, I have to say, typically speaking, I'm not into kind of port finishes, but something's really singing with this, and I really love it. Yeah, absolute winner for me. So yeah, definitely check them out, and I'll hopefully see you on more Summerton videos, because I'm going to their festival next month, and if you're a member, then you can get a ticket and you can join me there. See you later.